Let's continue Roman portraits with some examples that come to us from Pompeii. Beginning with 724, which is located in our textbook. It's a portrait of a man and wife, a pretty traditional subject, a marriage portrait, basically. If you lived in the ancient Roman world and you wanted your portrait painted, what you would do is call in an artist to come and visit your house. And that artist would put your picture on the wall in fresco. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. The husband and wife are both painted with a reasonable amount of verism. I think you can particularly see it in the man's face, and then, as we might expect, with honesty, but perhaps not with the unflattering verism on the lady's face that we might find on the man's face. So that they're direct, they're fresh, they're kind of honest, and we think that these people probably looked like this. However, beyond the face, which we now know is important as a signifier for the Romans, beyond that face, what the artist would allow you to do is pick, and he would have images that you could pick from, a pattern book, if you'd like to think of it that way. And you could pick costume, you could pick jewelry, you could pick a hairdo, and you could also most certainly pick symbols that served as attributes of your status. And in the case that we're looking at right here, we think this is a baker and his wife. Symbols or emblems, perhaps, that indicate status and rank within the community. The man who has a bit of a furrowed brow and maybe a little bit of an unruly, not fully grown beard is holding in his hand a scroll. And we think that that is intended as a diploma, a certificate, essentially, that attests to his education. As a baker, and we're not 100% certain, but we do believe that this couple is a baker and his wife. The particular house where they're painted had two different owners, so it's a little tough to be sure, but we do think this may be the baker. And what the baker's doing is holding up a scroll that references his education, when in fact the baker might not indeed have had that education. The same is true for the woman, and I would like you to identify a kind of equal partnership between them. The lady's a little bit shorter than he is, but she does stand in front of him, a little bit closer to the viewer. And in the ancient Roman world, women did have a reasonably equal status to their husbands. They had a lot of rights and a lot of freedoms as well. What Our Lady holds is a stylus used for writing and a tablet. The tablet would open up and it would be coated with wax so that this woman could put her draft of the text that she would write on much more expensive parchment. She would be putting the draft on the wax to make sure that she knew exactly what she was going to say. That indicates that the woman is well educated. In other words, she can write, so she's educated. But it also says something about how frugal and practical she is, and those would be Roman virtues, because it means that she's getting the letter right before she goes to transfer it to much more expensive parchment. We have, in fact, found these as remains from the ancient Roman world, and you're looking at one in the middle of the bottom of the slide screen, and they're kind of folded like modern day books, but they were coated with wax, and you could do a trial run of your text, and then you could erase it, and you could start over with another trial run. This depiction then, suggesting the woman's education and frugal nature and thoughtfulness, is conveyed also through the stylus, which she holds delicately with one finger resting on it up to her chin. It makes her basically look thoughtful. And that's what the artist is attempting to convey. How do we know this? Well, we have a series of images that are very similar. The one that is circular in the top right, and it's 724A in our textbook, also comes from Pompeii. It is a depiction of another woman, and she's holding a stylus in a very similar way, and she's holding one of these clay tablets, book form basically, as she is thinking about what she is going to be writing. This use of the same symbols suggests that the couple, as well as the independent woman, are drawing from a pattern book, the same kind of pattern book, that would allow them to figure out the way that they want to be shown. Yes, the face of the individual is probably right on, but they have selected the attributes, maybe even the clothing, the hairstyle, and the jewelry. For example, in the top left part of our screen, we see in the circle a woman who is wearing a really jazzy hairnet made out of gold. And this would be a testament to her status, her wealth within society. Perhaps she did not have this status and rank. Nevertheless, she could choose to be selected to be displayed that way. Okay, how do we know for sure what we're looking at? Well, we found some real ones. Now, this is one that came from an archaeological excavation, and it literally is a gold hairnet, almost as if the gold has been sewn. So we know that these were quite real and that individuals could choose to be depicted with these attributes. Both of those portraits come from Pompeii, and I do need to say something about the importance of the remains of Pompeii and the cities near it. Vesuvius, a gigantic eruption, occurred in the year 79 CE, and it was massive. It was not really uncovered, at least significantly, until the 18th century. Everything was covered with ash and lava. The people who were living, and I'm going to focus on Pompeii because it's probably the best known, were of a population we estimate somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000. We also believe that about 80% of the people got out, so that only 20% of the population died at the site. It was, we think, the toxic fumes and ash that actually killed them. The bodies are difficult to recover. Most of the skeletal remains that we do have come from Herculaneum, which is a second city, and you're looking at an example of that on my screen. The people gathered near the shore waiting for a ship to come to rescue them. The ship never came and they died, and I do believe those are the skeletons, or at least some of the skeletons that we're looking at right there. You can also see at the top right the core of the volcano, which is substantial, and in the slide on the left, that's Vesuvius in the background. This is the modern city. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure if I really want to live that close to Vesuvius. The excavated site of Pompeii is in the foreground, so you can see it's pretty massive. In other words, it's a very important site for us because it gives us a huge amount of information. When it was discovered in the 18th century and excavations began, and they continue today, it set off a revival of interest in the ancient Roman world that's going to fuel the style in art that's referred to as neoclassicism. So it's important in a number of ways, but for us in particular because it gives us information about life and death also in Pompeii. At the city of Pompeii itself, we do not have much in the way of skeletal remains. The individuals who fell in the streets, or perhaps still in their houses, and were covered by ash and lava, did disintegrate. Consequently, when excavations took place, people were going through with metal poles in the layers of ash and lava, and when they could poke through and there was an opening where their pole slid easily downward, it was an indication that a body had been there and had decayed and vaporized essentially. So they filled it with plaster. So what you are looking at are the plastered molds, essentially taken from the molds of the dead people, which do give us the instant in time of their death. The figure in the upper right with his hands up to his face is believed to have been a mule driver, a laborer basically. And this does tell you that it's the fumes, it's the dust, it's the smoke, it's the fumes of the ash and of the gases and the debris of the ash that he's trying to block out, which did ultimately kill him. The two slides, upper left, do depict a trio, a woman and a child, and you can see those figures located right here. There is a man with them. A larger figure, the woman and child, smaller, go down first, presumably from the toxic fumes. The man is leaning on an elbow, attempting in his last moments of life to do what he can to help them. For a long time, we've wanted to interpret these folks as a husband, wife, and child, and perhaps they are, but the recent interpretation indicates that the man might actually be a slave. Nevertheless, it would be his obligation to do everything he could to save the woman and the child. Along the bottom, there are a series of images. A little bit of the skull, I believe, is visible on this particular individual. I picked it to show you the grimace on his face to actually let you know that this was not a particularly pleasant way to die, and that's witnessed also by the image in the center of the screen. Animal lovers, you're probably not going to want to look at this, but the animals at Pompeii that remained, and this includes a cast taken of a dog that was chained in the house. It indicates, just as the human figure below, the agony that the folks, and that includes the animals at Pompeii, would have experienced in their last moments. One of the most important remains from Pompeii is the Forum. That is a word I would like you to know, and you can find an image of it in your book 712. The Forum, which is located right here and over here, is a design element that it would appear in every Roman city. It grew out of the initial crossroads where the city was founded, and it was created as a long rectangular plaza that was essentially an open pedestrian mall. It was always close to vehicles, horse riders, carts, and so forth, to encourage commerce and to allow human beings to have easy access to the requirements that a city would provide for them, including places where you could get a shop, also places where you could go to record a deed for sale of your property or get a marriage license. So that this was basically, this is the hub of the city. It's the place where everything takes place, including the marketplace and, as we'll see in a moment, the law court. What I would like to stress about this is that it is designed to carefully outline, delineate, and make clear where the space lies, so that around the edges of this long rectangular shape, there's a colonnade. That means that the space is defined, it is placed on axis, so that you as a visitor would be directed in the proper direction. And in this case, along the Forum, it leads you up the central axis to the main temple, which was the major temple for the city of Pompeii. Going over here to my diagram, here is my main temple. I would like you to note also, this is characteristic of the Romans, there is only one way in. What the Romans are doing is very carefully orchestrating space for us. They are finding a way to outline and control space, with the goal in mind of directing us and maintaining a tightly ordered Roman society. I would also like you to be familiar with the word basilica, which is shown right here. It is a Roman law court. It is an architectural design that will be continued later as the Romans become Christians and are seeking a formula for a Christian church. Those of you who have ever been inside a church will probably recognize the nave, which is the central area, and the two side aisles. These are terms that make up the basilica, and because of their importance to the Romans and to the Romans who become Christian, I would like you to recognize those terms: basilica, nave, and side aisle. We'll visit them again.